going. Welcome to week 5 or session 5. We should call it session 5 because we haven't met every week because of vacations and such. But yes, very exciting today. So let me just put up the slides. We get into it. We are going to start with our mental warm-up. Tom,
well, I can take this. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 5th session. As Adam said, today we're going to talk, we're going to spend a little bit of our time talking about values that we all share for the coalition as partners, to kind of get us going and thinking. We thought it would be good to kind of just go around and have everybody share something that that they feel is an important value that they hold personally, or a question that I know Adam and I like to ask is, what shows up when you show up? So when you show up to something, what can people expect? So I'll start. I think it's fair that if I'm going to ask this question, that I will go first, so you guys can give yourselves a little time to think about it. I'd say for me, what shows up when I show up is just a general, and it really reflects my strengths. My number one strength is positivity, and I generally feel fairly like energized and enthusiastic. And so I think that's something that when I show up, that generally shows up, unless it's a Monday morning, which obviously it is. So I can call on people, or we can just take volunteers. All right. Well, I will call on people. No one is just jumping.
I'll go ahead. No.
Thank you. Thank you.
When I show up, I'm engaged. I'm a learner, so I'm listening. I don't always ask all the questions, and it's because I'm processing some of the information, but I'm writing the questions and I'll go ask someone else. So when I show up, I'm showing up totally engaged, ready to gather some new information and put it in my file folders.
Fantastic. Love it. Who wants to go next?
I can go.
All right. Thanks, Kate.
I think integrity is huge for me. So I think I show up that way, and it's a value that I really hold close. So if I say I'm going to do something, I'm a person of my word. So I think I expect that of others. Thanks.
So integrity, engaged.
I can go. I think in terms of value, I value connections. So I think when I show up, there's a curiosity and willingness to connect with other people over shared ideas.
Okay. Katie?
I can go. I think when I show up, there's an openness. I don't try to have too many preconceived notions that I hold too dearly. And also I have a strong follow through. So kind of like what Kate was saying, if you ask me to do something, I'm going to be sure to do it.
Love it. Anybody else? And I can call on people too, but let's keep this going. Bev?
Yes. I think it's a respect for others' thinking and thoughts, and learning to, and I love to hear other people think and how they process information, and support people in their thoughts, even though it may be different.
Very nice.
I'll say for myself would be, I show up with the goal of understanding. Like, I value understanding others. So just, being open to hearing what somebody has to say and really seeking to understand what they're saying.
Love it.
I can relate a lot to what Tina said. I engaged, maybe not speaking up as much, but I'm listening is one of my greatest strengths. And so I really enjoy listening and processing and taking my time to absorb what's being said.
Great.
I can go. I think when I show up, I like to show up prepared, knowing sort of what the purpose is, so I can bring with me what I can share and contribute. So just a notion of preparedness comes to mind for me.
Good.
One of the values I think about is belonging. I just like to hear what others have to say and like want to collaborate with others.
Okay. Jenny?
One of my strengths is belief, and that's high value on responsibility and ethics, and so that's kind of what my expectations are going into from everyone else, and what they can expect from me.
Okay, I think Kimberly, Jillian, Katina.
I think when I show up, people can count on thoughtful consideration and a willingness to just join you in solving whatever problem you're trying to solve. And I value consistency and work ethic, and a willingness to just show up, you know, for other people.
Love it. Kimberly, Katina, I don't think either of you have gone, or I'd love to hear April and Adam too, if you guys are willing.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think goodwill is important as a value, and innovation.
Put a lot of work in to know what I know. And so when I enter space, I bring all of that with me. But I'm also open and teachable, right? So I often look to be convinced to think differently. But I also show up with a strategic mind, a willingness to share information, and to bring other people along with me in this space. But I'm steadfast in what I believe and what I know to be true. I think I bring, you know, like, I don't know, I some people may think I'm very serious, and I'm not. So I bring that kind of spirit to the space too. It's like, it could be a very serious conversation, but like, let's be jovial, let's be loose, let's, you know, still have fun in the process of doing hard work.
Okay. I think we've got two others. I don't want to force you to participate if you don't want to, so. All right.
Yeah, I said understanding. This is Kimberly, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, did you already go?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
You're good, you're good.
I should have written down who went, so. All right, well, we'll move on.
Yeah, very good. I think that conversation about values, we're going to be returning to. So, you know, let's definitely keep in mind some of the things we've talked about. And just what are values, just planting some thoughts in your mind as we're getting ready to as we come to that conversation later, is, you know, what are values, why do they matter, what role do values play in your life, in your work life or your home life? How about values in the people around you, or even conversations about values? I will tell you, I haven't talked about values, I mean, hardly at all in the last few years. And then all of a sudden,
Shopify helps you
it's showing up to Shopify. Is that me? I don't even know what that is. Hold on. Is
online store. Wow.
that me?
Amazing. Find more customers with our easy-to-use marketing.
Sounded like an ad, Adam. Are you like getting paid to do sponsorships or something?
I know his Siri was acting up earlier, so I think it's just technology is out to get him today.
Okay.
Did you hear it even after I muted myself?
No.
No.
Okay, good. I don't even know. I still to this moment don't know where that ad came from. I'm so sorry. But like conversations about values, and obviously those values were brought to you by whatever advertiser that was. But I mean, no, but think about where values are coming from all the time. That was, I'm trying to work with the material given to me, but it's also true that values are something that are, maybe imposed on us, or, where do they come from exactly? So we'll come back and explore all of that. For now, let's build our agenda, and we have our POM approach. So so here the focus for today is continuing with creating our shared thought bubble. And as April touched on last week, and I think others have remarked as well, and this came up a lot in our conversation last week, was really if we're going to be getting into the strategizing and all of that process, well, we need to align on what are these things to us? What does literacy mean? What do we want for Kansas City? It was a really interesting conversation last time about, city of readers. Well, maybe not so much. That's maybe an idea that might be more romantic, but what about the real functionality of like literacy for survival, literacy for functionality? And so getting aligned on those things, but also taking a sort of audit or census of who's already working in what space. We've started to build, and we'll get into it a little bit today, started to build a little understanding, but yet we're still not there with a full understanding of who's all playing or working within this space, or different age groups or different areas of literacy. So we're learning about each other. So building this shared thought bubble is the focus for today. I first want to ask you all if you agree or disagree, because everything else stems from that. I mean, we've populated other ideas, but truly, we're offering these ideas as like drafts, but what do you think? So any other thoughts on this focus, creating a shared thought bubble? Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I think combining the conversation you've just shared and the values discussion we just had, I'll just bring up that our team internally dedicated our shared work time across this fiscal year to creating our organizational core values. And it's been a really fun process of just conversations and discussion. But one of the things that has come up about it, I think that comes to mind when you ask that question, is that we've had a lot of conversations among this very small team about how differently we interpret language. Even the language of values. When we talk about a word like integrity, and different things come into our minds, and we're trying to kind of make space to talk through that, so we know why we agree or disagree on things when we're saying the same words. And so I think that the more that can be included, and I apologize that I wasn't in last week's conversation, so maybe that's already kind of been a driving force of that conversation. But when we talk about the subtleties of literacy and the complexities of it, and I noticed Jillian shared an article, I think, on kind of different literacies, like to make that word a plural was just fascinating to me. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to make sure we're just saying what we understand we're saying when we use language.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Creating that shared thought bubble around language. It's kind of like a more like playful way of saying what you're describing exactly, and that meaning making process. And we have to do it as a group. Literacy is what allows us to do it as a species. I mean, it's like that is what links us. And there's so much here, so much richness. So does it sound like this focus here of continuing with that shared thought bubble then is on point? And I guess I could say, why it matters, but add to it as well. It'll allow us to complete our discussion on key terms. And it'll allow us to advance our conversation about who else needs to be here. And then it allows us to now have that shared thought bubble conversation about values. Tricky things that if you don't talk about them will show up, whether you know it or not. So they're in the background. Let's bring them to the foreground. So Any thoughts on that as to why it matters? Any other thoughts for why creating shared thought bubble will matter? And then from there, we say, all right, well, if that's our purpose, what outcomes would reflect it? So I'll have some starter ideas. Feel free to add or change or reject. So having adequate clarity on the key terms so that we can move forward. What is literacy? What is literacy across the lifespan? What is literacy in Kansas City? Another outcome would be understanding of the gaps in this coalition and specific suggestions for who we want to talk to fill in those gaps. And then another outcome would be that we draft a set of values for the coalition. And then we can refine it later, but at least getting a draft could be a nice output. And that would feed into the next series of conversations, which, just to kind of pan out a little bit, would be, we want to clarify our purpose for the coalition, our outcomes for the coalition, the methods, and values are relevant to all three. So, yeah, any other outcomes you'd like to see? I'll go into the agenda next, just see if it matches those outcomes. But before I do, yeah, anyone? So then the methods, which is kind of what our agenda is. I mean, you don't really call it that, but an agenda is, okay, here's how we're going to spend our resources, right? So if it's about spending resources to produce an outcome, then that's my definition for a method. So how we're going to spend our time and our attention and our collective conversation is we're going to revise some of the work we started in terms of some of these definitions the groups worked on. So we'll do that next. April will do that. Then Tom will take us through a little revisiting of our conversation about literacy across the lifespan, which gets into what gaps might be there, what people to engage. It should also show our strengths too, where we might have some strength. We'll take a break, 5 minutes, allow us a little reset. We'll come back. I'll do a little primer on values, say some things that might hopefully spark some conversation. Would love to hear your thoughts on values. And then we'll get into some breakouts where you will, in your smaller groups, work on a set of values to propose. And then what Tom, April, and I could do is take those and do some drafting with it, come back to you with something to show you in terms of a set of values and get your feedback. But before that, we'll do some debrief as a larger group, sharing out here what y'all think. And we'll have a wrap up, plus Delta, see what homework we might want to do, and then what next steps are, and then we'll bring it to a close. Does that sound like a good agenda for what we're wanting to do? Because if so, then what I do is I just put that right in there, like that, and that becomes our methods for getting to our outcomes. I think we have our meeting set. So with that, we are going to move into revised literacy definitions, please.
All right, yeah, I can pick this one up. Hi guys. Really, I envision this time being a share out, the work that you've been doing in your committees. I know we had kind of those 3 main questions, and actually, can you share that that next slide, Adam, just to kind of remind everyone of what we did last time we were together. I know it's been a couple of weeks, but those main questions that we were really exploring together, what is literacy? How are we defining literacy? What do we actually mean by literacy across the lifespan? And then, yeah, kind of getting to this concept of KC as a city of readers, or, otherwise defining kind of our vision and mission as a coalition. Does that framing make sense? What would we propose instead of it? I know we made a lot of progress at our last meeting And yeah, for the purpose of today, I'd love to get a share out from each group. We can do a little refining together. I want to also just set expectations that it's very unlikely that we are going to, get a perfectly, totally, 100% aligned definition for all of these things today. Really kind of the purpose of going through this exercise right at this stage and where the coalition is and the strategic planning is to have enough clarity to be able to go into the strategic planning. So today, going into the spirit of sharing ideas, getting the consensus around these ideas that is enough, like good enough to be able to move to the next stage, which will be, doing all the strategic planning, defining our purpose, defining our outcomes. So again, getting that consensus, from all of us on what do we really want to see and kind of, what is our working definition that we can continue to hone over the course of our time together and beyond. So if that makes sense, I'd love it if the first group could go ahead. I did take a look at the shared document. It looks like people have been working directly in there, or at least some of the groups have. So it'd be great if everyone could open that document up and we can kind of all be looking at that as well as we go through. And if any groups would like to share their screens, we can also make that option available too. Adam, I don't know if I'm host, so I think you'd have to do that.
You are co-host?
Oh, okay, yeah, it looks like everybody can share screens, so you all have that functionality too. So that said, I'd love to turn it over to group one. What is literacy? And just talk a little bit about what your discussion was like this week with your committees and what your output is. What's your new revised definition?
I was part of group one, and what our revised definition, we did put it in the core definitions document. We came to the ability to write, read, listen, and speak so a person can communicate, engage, and thrive in their world and beyond. It's a very kind of a broad general description. I don't think we can be real specific because, as Kristen said, the document that Jillian shared was you can really go into specifics, but we're looking for a big general thought process. Our group, as we're discussing it, we set a time to meet. We discussed it for a while. And then we've also been picking each other with, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So it has been something that we've really thought about, and this is where we landed. We thought it was important to keep the word communicate in there, as well as add engage and keep the word thrive in there as well.
Mm-hmm. And I like your addition of, specifically thrive in their world and beyond their world. It reminds me of the conversation last time about, their world may not be as big as it could be. If we're able to open that a little bit wider for people, then that could be a good focus also.
And we had a little discussion about different abilities, people with different abilities, and what that looks like. And that kind of helped with that and beyond.
Well, I'd love to hear reactions from people who were not in Jenny's group. Do you all feel like this captures what we discussed last time? And again, don't be afraid to, put ideas out there. I hope that we've, reached that point in this group where we can just brainstorm together, and it's not personal. We're just trying to get things to, where we need to be able to move forward. So, but I think this is really strong. Can I get an assenting opinion or a dissenting opinion or a neutral opinion? Because this will be the foundational kind of definition, right? We talked about how literacy across the lifespan is kind of piggybacking off of this definition. Same thing with, the ramifications for KC as a city of, whatever that noun will be.
Suggested revision.
Mhm.
I think, we start talking about communicate, and it's like, I think literacy is so much more than that. I think it's critical thinking. I think it's being able to analyze, synthesize any type of text, right? And so problem solve, access resources, all of those things. So I like that revision suggestion because it includes engage and thrive in addition to communicate. So that's great.
I sorry again that I missed this and love where this has landed. One thing that I've been working on in a lot of our partnerships and work is expanding the phrase literacy or literacy development to be language and literacy development. And I almost wonder if there's sort of a precursor even to the phrase write, read, listen, and speak, which is just developing a language that then helps us ensure that we're really focusing on 0 to 5 and the concept of even understanding that there is language and the breadth of what that is.
I like that. Any responses, reactions to Kristen's thought?
One thought that we kind of touched on in our group was also different levels of literacy and what that looks like. Lots of different levels. So we kind of kept that in mind, Kristen, as we were going. Speaking kind of gives a nod to that developmental age range, but I like what you're saying there.
And of course, we can build out all sorts of more detailed materials to really break out how we're operationalizing this definition at different places across the lifespan too. So that's another way to think about it. Because I realize it's a lot to have to summarize in one sentence. But it sounds like we have pretty good consensus about this, at least in terms of meeting like the good enough criteria to be able to move forward with this for now and to continue honing. Does that sound reasonable? It's a pretty big deal, guys, for us to be able to define literacy together and to have consensus around that. So I want to give us, let us pat ourselves on the back about that. That's awesome. And thank you, Jenny's group, for spearheading that.
Yay!
Yeah, right. We gotta celebrate. All the wins. Okay, well, let's move on then. So what about literacy across the lifespan group? Can you please share out?
Put in the chat the link to the document where you can find our revised definition. And I can share the screen as well.
That'd be great.
Okay. So it says it's loading. So can you all see it yet? No, it's still loading.
Not on my side.
Okay.
But we do have the link, so it might just for now go. Oh,
yeah,
looks like it's working now.
Yeah, so this is our proposed final definition. So literacy across the lifespan is the continuous development and application of skills in reading, writing, speaking, listening, and comprehension, integrated with the ability to effectively find and process information. This evolving set of skills enables individuals to actively participate in their own lives in the world, empowering them with agency. It involves acquiring the necessary tools to make informed decisions, navigate challenges, and engage meaningfully within the world, now and in the future. As engaged community members of society, ensuring that individuals are not merely passive participants of actions done to or for them, but active participants in shaping their life trajectories. Literacy across the lifespan is the continuous development and applications of skills blah, 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 integrated with the ability to effectively find and process information. And we have some strikeouts here because as we talked about it, we saw some redundancies, and we thought we wanted you all to see the definition in totality, but the suggestion is that the strikeouts are implemented and we stop at agency in that second little snippet, if that makes sense.
And then is this quote underneath, is that part of the definition, or how does that integrate?
Oh, Linda, you want to add to that?
I think just, you know, in the process of meeting and talking about across the lifespan, I got to thinking about what literacy is going to look like in 20 and 30 years. And we don't really know. And it reminded me of the Marianne Wolf book, Reader Come Home. So I pulled it back out, and I just threw this in. Katina, you know, created this kind of brainstorming document, and, you know, the idea of how important the life of reading is for human beings if we are to form an ever more realized democratic society for everyone. So it also, to me, that maybe goes more into, you know, city of readers kind of idea, but it just got me thinking more about the questions that we should ask ourselves. Why do we want a literate society? Why is it important? And why do we want a high level of literacy, not just, you know, functional? I mean, I think we're advocating for more than just functional literacy, you know, for the success of our world.
I love that. I love a good quote. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, yeah, it grounds us in, you know, why does it matter, for sure. Okay, well, so it looks like we're working with kind of this top part then for the definition itself, or at least that's the proposition. Yeah, I'd love to get responses from the group on, is this kind of hitting the points we were talking about last 2 weeks ago, last time?
I have a quick comment. I was a part of group 1, and I feel like this really builds off of a lot of the stuff we just defined and what literacy is. So I feel like, I don't know, from my perspective, these two definitions are working in partnership with one another, which feels like a really good thing for this group. So that seems good, that we're in alignment with one another in our thinking, which is, again, the goal of the conversation. So this seems like an expansion of a lot of the little seeds that we started with in the literacy conversation. And I do think that's due to some of Katina's comments last time, because we took a lot of her thoughts and used those to rework our definition. And then, you know, seeing some of the group 2's work in this, I think we're moving in the same direction, which feels really great.
I love to hear that. That's so great. I'd love another comment. And again, feel free to. Oh,
sorry, I'll jump in. I like that you said that, Katie, because we had a conversation around like, where does our definition stop and then the next one pick up? And I feel like these three will all build on each other in a really natural way, and that we are aligning on what the core, I think, value set is that we agree with, that informs the way we build out these definitions. So we, you know, are like, okay, but where does, you know, last time I talked about literacy, we want it to be sort of a two-way street, that we want internal motivation to become more literate and have the tools at our disposal to do so, but we also want to live in a community that provides those tools. And that's where then, what does a city of readers or a literate city look like? Because that's what the city's or community's job is then, to participate in this process. And that's where the next question then picks up. So I like that you said that.
Some way connected to these comments. I love how this second group has sort of taken the foundation and expanded it through I think what Katina shared was really meaningful to her around sort of the broader cognitive issues or structures that have to envelop literacy to make it a complete process. And I think that's critical. But I also think that we would be remiss in not recognizing the broader emotional context that has to envelop literacy and communication. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about the fact that many of us in our work on literacy, and every school I've ever been part of, has this powerful focus both on literacy and on social emotional development. And over the years, I've really come to think that they're actually the same thing. They're very much about an understanding of how to communicate from you and how to receive from others, whether it's an intellectual concept or an emotional one. And I think that if we can somehow include a little of that emotional or social component along with those intellectual elements, then when we get to that next phase that Jillian just mentioned about, like, well, so what does that mean for the city? It is inclusive of the fact that we have to be emotionally literate as well, along with, you know, opportunities to engage intellectually.
That's really interesting. Do we feel like that piece of emotional literacy is reflected in this definition for literacy across the lifespan? I guess it's just food for thought, something to keep in mind. But I like that element of it. I'm not sure we really spoken in precisely those terms before, or at least not as a group. All right, any other reactions? Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for putting this together. I just want to echo the group that it looks like, you know, you all are, it's reflecting alignment within the group that, you know, we see such clear connections between the first definition and the second, and that it's really just, you know, building out that vision more clearly as it relates to the lifespan, which is just beautiful. Can't wait for group number 3 to go. Would you mind all please sharing out someone from your group?
For sure.
And let us know, are we going back to the original
Yes.
document in terms of?
The core definitions document is where our notes are.
Awesome.
So we talked about some of the questions that we were left with last time. And that was the right document. It was the top of that section 3. So right there, so we crossed out City of Readers and changed the questions to what does it mean to be, for KC to be a literate city? That was based off our conversation last time about City of Readers kind of romanticizing and thinking, or kind of how our working definition of literate didn't include just reading, but like accessing all sorts of things. So then we kind of started just going down, answering some of the questions that we were left with last time instead of a definition. And kind of what we ended up with was this middle, like, when we say literate city, what do we mean? And our working definitions are kind of in the mix of these two. A region and thriving metropolitan area with citizens who can navigate their lives effectively, or a community in which systems and people are dedicated to literacy, meet folks where they are, and encourage the growth for a thriving metro area where people can navigate their lives effectively. And so that really came from us thinking of, like, we want people to come from like wherever they are in their literacy journey, but continue to feel like they can grow, you know, beyond just the basics, but feel supported in that. And also just like kind of what we've been talking about not everyone having the same needs for literacy. And so within that, we started kind of talking about the other stakeholders. To be a whole city, like, who else do we need at the table? What systems do we need to think about? And that sort of thing. Kate, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think I would just like echo that these definitions really seem to mesh, and a lot of what Katina's group about, you know, navigating their lives effectively. I think it was, you probably put that a little more in different words than we did, but I think that's what we were trying to say is, you know, having agency, being able to have your needs met. I think in terms of thinking about social emotional needs and literacy, part of that is including some of those stakeholders, you know, like whether it's parent teacher organizations, whether it's faith-based organizations, like each of those are meeting a social emotional need for people. And so I do think I see how those things can weave together. But Erin, I think you mostly hit on what we discussed otherwise.
And we weren't sold on the literate city as like the name of it. We were like, that at least encapsulates where we're at, but it's not very it doesn't like roll off the tongue. It's kind of clunky. So we were open to other ideas on that.
Thank you, guys. I'd love to hear reactions from the group.
I like the thoughts behind everything. But I'm personally having trouble seeing it in as like a definition. So I like all the components of it.
I honestly like looking back at the proposed new definition for literacy across the lifespan. I'm just looking at it. I'm like, I feel like that's kind of, we were saying similar things, and that, you know, the biggest difference is engaging other community partners or, you know, organizations that are deeply involved in people's lives in the community. But I feel like they're very similar definitions. I think the biggest difference is, you know, who do we engage that's not currently at the table? Who are the people who need to be part of the bigger conversation, whether that's people who are training, you know, college, people who are training teachers, or you know, people who are providing professional development, or whether that's, you know, doctors who are seeing the youngest people who are, I don't know, but I think that when I was looking at that definition about literacy across the lifespan, I was like, man, we're really saying similar stuff.
I wonder if possibly this question is where we might expand or articulate about the different types of literacy that come up. You know, we've talked about sort of a functional literacy versus digital literacy or emotional literacy. Like maybe this is a place to kind of recognize how broad and complex literacy is, and that then leads to, so who should be involved should be broad and complex.
I do think, you know, this in itself is productive, you know, the fact that we're defining the geography of it, and it seems like there's consensus in the group around that. And that also means, you know, if that's our pitch, you know, to the community, helping other stakeholders to align around that, you know, geographical definition is itself, you know, an important piece of this.
It seems to me that a city, that what we're looking for here, when we look at the first definition, what is literacy? The second definition, what is literacy across the lifespan? Then the third thing is that Kansas City is a city that's designed to support literacy across, our definition of literacy across the lifespan. So what does that mean? It means our city expressly values literacy. It means our city is organized such that it promotes and fosters literacy. And it means that the resources are made available to do so, which means, of course, we think money, but it really is that expertise. I mean, I don't know. I feel like we're all getting smarter about literacy together, and you know, you're the experts on it, you know. So yeah, so it's a citywide commitment is really what I think it means. But yeah, I don't know. Just some thoughts.
I really like that, Adam. I think just that succinct, Kansas City is a city designed to support and expressly values literacy. I think can lends itself to a lot of great sub questions about how is our city designed to support it, and then how are we showing that we value it, and that can get into those multiple literacies too, as Kristen mentioned.
I agree. I think that really resonates with me quite a bit. I think there's a vision to that where we can ask ourselves, are we poised for that? And if not, how do we contribute to and also hold ourselves accountable to that vision? I also think it's easier to convey that vision in a small amount of words to get a hook, which at the end of all of this, there is a bit of marketing that goes in to get other stakeholders involved. And so I think with the city of readers, where we started, which I have come to the understanding that might have been, romanticized or exclusionary in some respects or create barriers for others, but it was a great tagline, if nothing else. And I feel like, literate city doesn't have the same ring to it, but creating a vision for that is something people can latch onto, even if they're not literacy core people as we are, right? So I feel like there's something to run with there.
And I think that the phrase literate city kind of sounds the alarm a little bit more to let people know that we are looking at, and it lets people know here's where we are right now in terms of being a literate city. And then, I don't know, I know I haven't gotten into measurement yet, but figuring that out, I think having that be front and center in the campaign, the marketing campaign, can be helpful, to kind of put it in that way.
I wonder, I noticed that in both the first and the second question, the word engage or engagement comes up. And I wonder if that could be the element that kind of finds the middle of the romanticized city that reads, and the sort of what I fear might pull us down to thinking more functionally of literate city, rather than might be a phrase something like a city engaged through literacy or something like that. Use that engagement to bring it back into like that we're shooting high.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about engagement. And I guess I'm thinking about, when we say literate city, what do we mean? It just seems to lend itself to a lot of community conversations and brainstorming and getting people thinking about it, and maybe having those, I don't know, it just seems like a great conversation to discuss, to help people understand, where we are functionally, but then, kind of go into kind of what Katina was leading us to think about agency and not limiting yourself based on your current set of literacy skills, but thinking beyond what is possible.
I love this discussion, guys, and kind of the importance of the word literate. It sounds like, so are we leaning towards keeping literate in the tagline? Maybe changing the verbiage around it a little bit, using engage or empower. Is there, I guess my main question is, are we sticking with literate? Do we think that's a good word? Is there something else that we want to entertain?
Of the term literate, like it gets just to the heart of the matter, right?
Yeah.
Of the work that we do, what we aspire to do, who we aspire to be. While that is very broad, because you start talking about math literacy and social emotional literacy and all the things, I think it calls other people to the table. Like our focus as a collective, of course, we know is the reading literacy as we know it. But I think it sounds, I think somebody said earlier, kind of sounds the alarm, or is that trigger warning to say, hey, there are other areas of literacy that we need to focus on across our city. And as we do that, we may not be the group to do it, but maybe we're triggering other folks to go into some of those areas and start doing the same work in their area of literacy. So effectively, the whole individuals that participate in our society are growing in various ways, thereby our entire city then becomes stronger. If that makes sense. I feel like I was rambling a little bit.
It did make sense. Here, I took a stab at a definition. So
Oh, you just muted yourself.
I'm muted, sorry.
No
I
worries.
muted myself on accident. Okay, I took a stab at a definition. I'm putting it in chat. You can do what you will with it, but I'm just trying to get to a point where everything's sort of included in one sentence.
Can you read it to us?
Yes, Kansas City will be a literate city when each resident of the 5-county area has the ability to effectively and actively participate in their own lives with agency. And those 5 counties invest the resources needed to offer a legible landscape that empowers and inspires the continual development of each resident.
Giving that a second to sink in with people. I see some like hearts and thumbs up underneath. Can I hear some verbal reactions?
I think this is like a really great succinct way to address what we're trying to do here. I mean, it's obviously a really complicated question that has many answers that eventually, we'll have to address, but like this sounds great to me in terms of just easily defining what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it sets a clear vision. It has a call to action for, actually investing the resources that opens the door to, accountability. I think it hits a lot of like the values around agency and other, points that we've discussed that seem very important. Are we good with this? Is this meeting our good enough definition for now that we can continue to hone together over time?
I think it's great.
Oh my gosh, this is what we call thought leadership. Thank you, Jillian.
Wow, thanks, guys.
For pulling all that together for us. All right, well, I think we can give ourselves a round of applause. We just basically, we didn't solve literacy, but I think, that's a big step forward for us to be able to have this shared language, to be able to have, this, concise way of describing what we do and the vision that we have. This is going to really propel us in the strategic planning process. So honestly, that's amazing. You guys as a group are moving through that a lot more quickly than other groups do, and being able to find that consensus. So it's just a really good indicator of, how far we've come as a coalition. So just very excited for moving forward and starting the strategic planning process. I know that we are kind of at time for break. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, why don't we do this, Tom, if you're okay with it too, if everybody else is, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we'll then come back to the literacy across the lifespan, and we'll adjust our timing thusly. But I want to say a couple of things. First, I love the way the conversation is happening in the group, and the way there's comfort in challenging, and the way there's comfort in receiving it, and so I think that's great. And I'm also trying to imagine what would have happened if we went into strategic planning without these fundamental alignments. Yeah, any reactions to that before we take a break?
Couldn't have done it, not effectively.
I've just seen it happen so many times where it's like we just get, wait a minute, you meant this? Because I meant that. Oh, okay. Yeah. So wonderful. All right, then we'll take 5 minutes and Tom will come back with you and literacy across the lifespan.
A conversation, the literacy across the lifespan. So kind of picking up a little bit off of the definition that we talked about a few minutes ago. Also looking at the work that April had done to compile all of the responses to those who responded to the question about who you serve and at what ages and everything. So I will share my screen and bring up the literacy across the lifespan grid so you can take a look. I won't read this, but I'll just kind of go through it in case you haven't had a chance to look at it. But basically the organizations that serve at different age groups are outlined, and I believe we had about 6 groups respond. So this does not represent everybody in the coalition. So you can see early literacy is defined as 0 to 5 years. Reach Out and Read, KC Public Library, Lead to Read, Mid-Continent, Literacy KC, Turn the Page are all doing work for the age 0 to 5. And then going into elementary school, 6 to 11 years old. Again, the Kansas City Public Library, Lead to Read, Mid-Continent, Literacy KC, Turn the Page, all offer something or several things for each of this age group. Then moving into adolescence, 12 to 18 years old. And I think all of the groups, well, not all of them, but certainly Kansas City Public Library, Lead to Read, Mid-Continent, and Literacy KC offer things, programs for the 12 to 18-year-old group. And then the young adults, 18 to 25, Reach Out and Read, Kansas City's Public Library, Dreams KC, and Lead to Read, Mid-Continent, and Literacy KC. So lots of things offered to the young adult group. And then for adulthood, this is a big age group, but age 26 to 64 years old. Reach Out and Read provides referrals. Kansas City Public Libraries offers book clubs, signature events. Dreams KC trains parents to teach their children foundational literacy skills. Lead to Read offers 3 different areas of support. Mid-Continent offers programming. Literacy KC offers work as well. And Turn the Page has several family program type of programs there. So you can see all of those. And then finally, the later adulthood group, Reach Out and Read, Kansas City Public Library, Dreams KC, Mid-Continent, and Literacy KC. And then we have the final group is Elderhood, Reach Out and Read, KC Public Library, Mid-Continent, and Literacy KC. So the purpose of, kind of talking about this and really spending time on it is really to determine, before we go too much further in our work together, are there some obvious gaps, in terms of programming or resources for literacy across the lifespan? I mean, obviously, if we look at ages 0 to 80 plus, the groups that responded, we have programs, we have services offered across the lifespan. So there isn't an obvious hole or a gap. However, I know that in earlier conversations, it was clear that, there are no, really early, specific, early childhood type of organizations represented, and there are no higher ed organizations represented either. I recognize, that doesn't take away from the groups that are working in those spaces, like, Reach Out and Read, I know works specifically at the early childhood years. But I just want to throw it open, based on the results of the literacy across the lifespan data. What do you think in terms of, is there an obvious missing link between those age groups? Does anybody feel strongly that we need to reach out to another agency, invite them to join the coalition to fill a gap?
I was wondering about, it's a cool document to kind of look through and see everything, and maybe thinking about it like you, I think, mentioned higher education. So the resources and services that we all provide are, geared toward, seem to be parents and families and children directly, and maybe bringing in someone whose services are directly to teachers. So, like I think someone mentioned, people that do professional development, but getting some higher ed people that are in teacher training, I think would be a useful addition to the group.
Okay. Does anybody disagree with that?
No. And I think that if we were to look at an organization that does it somewhat well, I think that would center around the UMKC Regional Professional Development Center. If we're looking for thoughts.
Yeah, the next question would be, do you know somebody there that we could talk to, we could reach out to at the UMKC Center especially? And if so, you could just put it in the chat or send it as an email to Katina.
I was going to share with this group last week. I was talking to someone about Juniper Gardens, and they are doing a lot of research around impact with literacy in their area. So that might be someone that I don't have a contact. I can find a contact. That might be someone that would be interested in this group and be a good asset.
Can you say again what does Juniper Gardens focus on? I'm sorry.
Juniper Gardens it's a early childhood is what they focus on. And it's I know that they've done a lot of research around just development and the impact of it's called the Juniper Gardens Children's Project, I think. It's affiliated with KU, and they're it's like educational resources and working with partners to kind of develop the best ways.
Didn't they do the Lena study?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I remember that.
They do a ton of research.
Yeah, they do a lot. And I think they're involved in a local impact research project right now.
Okay, and I see in chat, Kate mentioned the Greater Kansas City Writing Project. Kate, did you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, so that's part of the National Writing Project. They used to be under the umbrella of UMKC, and I think they're under UCM now. But they do, it's a resource for teachers that they come together. They have a summer institute where teachers do action research, and it's really just deeply embedded in teaching writing. And I just put their website in, but they're currently doing they're doing a Show Me Literacies collaborative that talks about literacy development. They have grants to basically train teachers. And Greater Kansas City Writing Project teachers are some of the best. Like, they're just really thoughtful and doing good things in classrooms. So they might be a really great connection. I'm a former teacher consultant with them and have connections, so I can see with people there.
Yeah, I was talking with Katina a little bit earlier just about even different types of groups that are servicing. So based on different types of communities. So thinking about like a Guadalupe Center or Mattie Rhodes, having some of those folks at this table as well might be helpful.
So, one of the questions would be, the lots of great suggestions. You know, do you have a feeling? I mean, I think I guess I was thinking going into this conversation, adding 1 or 2 more members to the coalition could be good. I don't know if we'd want to expand it by 5 or 6 or more. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? Or maybe these are just good resources that we would draw on.
And I might just throw out there too, I mean, a way to think about this is like types of partnership. Like
Yeah.
there's one type of partnership, which is becoming a full coalition member. There are all sorts of other types of partnerships. They could be advisory roles. They could be, you know, an outreach, you know, sort of campaign, a listening campaign that we would do. That could all be part of like the community outreach component of what we do as a coalition. So just thinking in terms of types of partnerships, like becoming a coalition member is one method. But there are other methods too, and maybe we can brainstorm a little around that too in this space, if that's helpful.
Yeah, April, I love that idea. I always imagined that we would get to the point of sort of shaping out layers of this work of, you know, what are the ways that different types of stakeholders, you know, buy in and both inform the work and also carry it forward. Especially as we talk about different literacies, it's going to go broad. So I love that idea.
So, I mean, I appreciate everybody putting in the chat their recommendations. That really helps with kind of organizing this. So, but you can see
it start at 0. I think you mentioned that birth, well, they're in utero, right? Area. And so start at 0, I think is the organization for the most part that does that type of work with families. I know parents as teachers, but I think that has shrank so much in terms of funding and support and things like that. So that start at 0 would be another. And I would suggest they be a part of the coalition itself, not just a partner.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was kind of wanting to get your thoughts about. Who would you make a case to really become a full coalition member? And it sounds like start with 0 is kind of on the table.
I'm thinking maybe we need
Sorry.
maybe someone from government. Sorry.
You go.
Someone from the government, you know, like whether that's, I don't know who that would be, but if we want the city to be bought in, we're going to need the city to help with the planning process. My thought. Sorry, Kristen.
No, that's okay. I was going to say the other area we've talked about a bit over time that is, I think, only really represented in, from what I've seen in Literacy KC's adult work is ESL and even bilingualism, particularly for children developing language. We don't see that in our work, I don't think, unless I'm overlooking elements. At least it's not, you know, the focus area of very many of us.
And I wonder if that's where, and thank you, Jillian, because I think in your definition, you define geographically what this work looks like and who we're talking about when we say Kansas City. And so I think there's a potential to bring, we have nobody here from KCK, right? Right. And so that's a huge miss, big miss. And so when you start talking about ESL, English as a second language, or even on the Missouri side, because you have Allison Heil and their team that start with the international language pieces and all of that. But I think there's a significant opportunity to bring some folks that are doing great work in that area on board to make sure that we are always mindful of that immigrant and refugee population and how we serve them, because we can't act like they don't exist.
Okay.
Yeah, so I threw in a couple links to the chat, one of which was when someone was talking about the teacher pipelines and professional development. Can't remember who that was, but there's an organization called the Educator Academy that is run by Charles King, I believe his name is. And that would be a great, I think, if a great advisory organization or something, if we want to talk about teacher pipelines and PD. And then you mentioned no representation from KCK. And if we're on the kids subject, then Project Eagle has been doing this forever and ever in Wyandotte. And so that might be an interesting one. If we were to get Juniper Gardens, that's another one. And then the other, Jenny mentioned government. I think getting the KC Rising people, the city council, the chamber, that kind of representation in an advisory capacity would be really great.
Thank you for saying advisory.
Yes, I don't want to get this group more unwieldy in any way, not that we are, but there's a lot of us and more voice, only so many cooks in the kitchen, right? Before
but I like Adam said, maybe there needs to be a literacy czar, or something like that. And I love that, because before you said that, I was thinking that we need to have a champion that will move this initiative forward. Locally, but even at the state level. So when I think about the state level, I think of State Rep Barbara Washington, who is a literacy advocate, will find funding for you, who's having, the other women in the state legislature like champion this particular issue. And then locally, I think we could find someone on the council to do that too. But I don't necessarily, I think we're gonna have to bring them along. I think they have been around for so long that they really, and they have competing priorities and all these things. But I think sometimes they really don't understand the significance of literacy or education as it relates to the overall growth, stability, sustainability of our city and how we sell that. So I think we educate them and bring them along and create champions for us along the way.
Okay, so maybe a way that we could kind of move forward is to Adam and April and I could kind of go through the wonderful list of recommendations that you have and look at what might be a reasonable thought to add one or two to the coalition or not, and then certainly looking at the rings of supporters kind of around the coalition to advise, support, as Katina said, bring them along. So if you have thoughts of groups or entities that you want to see us explore, please continue to drop them in the chat. Or if anybody wants to make one final case on a full member class, bringing somebody in as a full member, I think start with 0. I heard strongly from Katina ought to be considered, but if anybody has any other thoughts, go ahead and state them now, but we'll bring this back to you after we've had a chance to kind of vet them and think through it a little bit more.
I'll just share that I 100% support start at 0.
100%? I'm just giving you trouble. Okay, great.
It's really good. Yeah. All right. What else here on this topic? Good. Y'all satisfied with our discussion here? Okay.
100%.
Awesome. 100. That's amazing. That's a high percent. All right. So with that, are we ready to talk a little bit about values then? Is that next? Yep. All right. So we wanted to, I guess we're caught a little bit between doing a little primer and then doing a little breakout, but I could do my primer really fast about values. So let me just do that. Do we have groups ready? Love it. Okay. Then, yeah, let me just do this really fast. Just a few things I want to say. Okay, I added a few notes. So you have all this here, but values denote the importance or worth of something. I mean, these things are obvious. I'm not saying anything you don't know. I'm just trying to bring it to the top of mind. That we use them to determine which actions are the best actions of what are the things that we consider the best actions to take. Values are often invisible, they're intangible, they're conceptual, they live in the background. And for those reasons, unless you actively keep them, in the foreground, they're going to stay there. But they could be elevated, they could be brought to the foreground, they could be made concrete, and they could be used in daily actions. They're either way. They could go. It just depends on the priority placed on them by people who are acting as leaders. One way that I connect values to progression theory and my work is that I'm very big on viewing individuals as patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And values are one of the strongest things that influence. What do I think about? What feels good to me and what feels bad to me? And then what do I do? And the values can be reflected in all of those. Values tell us what's right and what's wrong for us. I view institutions as value sets, whether it's a workplace, a school, a house of worship, or family, or neighborhood, or government. Institutions are sets of values. And values can either be just espoused, meaning, they're talked about, or they could be values in action. So, walk versus talk. Individuals' values are shaped by the institutions to which they identify with and belong. It's very important to align values. I mean, think about marriages or business partnerships where the values are completely misaligned and what happens from there. And then the last thing, I kind of hinted at this in the discussion, but that it's about how the degree to which we realize the values or make them real. So one of the groups was talking about, literacy as essential to realizing democracy. And I picked up on that word because we have the ability to realize the values or just leave them as talk or ideals. So those are just a few opening thoughts, and any reactions to any of that, and then I'll give you some directions we can get off into groups. Any reactions to anything? That was just meant to be a little get us thinking about values and popcorning some thoughts in your brains. So any popcorn in your brain you want to share? All right, then here's the instructions. We'll get you going into groups. That is 15 minutes still good? We should have enough time for that because I went through my stuff fast. You're welcome. Review the values generated during the warm-up that Tom led, where you all shared personal values. But as a group, create a set of values that you propose to guide the coalition's work. Don't worry, you're not going to be doing the final draft. So don't feel all the pressure. We're going to take all the group's input and then we'll coalesce it because that's what we do, coalesce. But another way, I added this as we were talking. What are the values of a city of literacy? If we're talking about, where Kansas City is a city of literacy, a metropoliteracy. What are the values of such a place? How would I know I was in Kansas City, the city that values literacy? So yeah, just some thoughts, and then come back to the group. We'll debrief a little bit. Let's see if there's good. And April, you put a link to a document.
Yeah, so I just dropped a link that has just quick kind of scratch notes that I took from the activity earlier today when we were all talking about our personal values. So that's something just to look at. You don't have to take anything from it, but just to kind of spark ideas in your group. And then, I have a spot underneath that for each group to include their list of values. And I think we're leaving it pretty open-ended in terms of how many or anything like that, just whatever resonates with your group. Does that sound right, Adam?
That sounds very good.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will go ahead and open the breakout rooms and we'll bring people back at 12:15.
All right, welcome back, everybody. First of all, how was the conversations in your group overall? And then I'd like to maybe just have a few groups share out what they heard. So just overall, how was the conversation? Good, good. Yeah. Awesome. All right, please. Yeah, I'd love to hear from who would like to be our first pickle. You know, the hardest one to get out of the jar is the first pickle. Who would like to go first and share their breakouts?
Kate, am I speaking for you when I say we can go? Because you have the
Yes.
list.
Yeah, I can.
Yes, thank
Sure.
you. Thank you, Tina.
Let me get this. So we really kind of struggled with this because we talked a lot about, you know, how are we creating values for other people and not forcing values on people? How do we share knowledge rather than just tell people what their values should be? So we kind of struggled with that, but then we talked a little bit about, you know, being honest, having empathy, and being open to different perspectives, showing up and getting engaged, having transparency, being able to consider different backgrounds, and then creating a safe place. And we talked a little bit about how, not quite sure how this works in terms of values, but how like relationship as being the foundation of anything, being able to build trust, and that takes time. And so, you know, in order to get people on board with what we're doing, like we have to take the time to let people know who we are and what we're doing, and building that trust, because that's how we get things done. So I'm not sure you know, how that plays into value, but we talked about, you know, how it works with kids in classrooms, and how as a bigger, broader picture, building trust with communities and getting people to be on board is really important. Did I forget anything?
Wonderful.
Very
No,
good.
that was great. Thank you. Thank you very much. You were a great first pickle. Good. Yeah, please, let's have another group go. I'd love to hear more thoughts.
Well, I was the note taker for group 3, so I'll jump in. We spent a little time at the beginning trying to figure out, like, are these the values for us as a group, or are these the values we reflect onto the city? That and we landed somewhere in the middle of that, I think. So we used the phrase, you know, if by these values, by guiding our work, the outcomes we pursue would adhere to these values. And then we really kind of just brainstormed what we were thinking and pulled from the list as well. Inclusiveness and belonging, and creating a city that is inclusive of all, access and free access to all. We started with the word access, and this thought came from a librarian. So that it, you know, needs to be free, but we also thought that maybe that was fundamentally in the concept of access, and that the word free may also bring up money as opposed to other kinds of non-accessibility issues. So really just talking about what access really means. Literacy as a human right, and making sure that we're building out a system or a city that recognizes literacy as a human right. Integrity, honesty, and transparency, as seen through quality, thorough, and reliable work. Maintaining a curiosity mindset, both and mindset, rather than an either or mindset. Keeping our work and the ongoing work of whatever this grows into dynamic, meaning that it's ever evolving and reflecting and continually improving, and not thinking of an end point to this, but as an ongoing work in progress. And growing in our own understanding, reinforcing the notion of lifelong learning and a commitment to learning. And please, group, chime in to expand on any of those.
Thank you. Yeah, anybody in the group want to expand on any of that? I'm sorry, I didn't even think to put this up while the second group was talking. I know that would have helped. All right, let's finish it up with the first group. Like to go ahead and share what you came up with.
I was a note taker, so I can I can share. So we kind of broke it down into two different sections. Like Kristen, we were kind of struggling with what values are we talking about here? So we kind of separated into how we want to interact as a group, the values, and then the values of a city. So we kind of talked about the same thing with acting with integrity, and we talked about what that means and how that encompasses respect and, you know, being, you know, fan on three kind of thing, engaging in collaboration, giving constructive criticism and giving grace, you know, as we're discussing things. It's very important to share your opinions and your thoughts, but we can do it in a nice way. And then the values of a city, again, being inclusive, making sure that everyone in the city feels like they belong in the city. But also we talked about the city being innovative and adapted and have an adaptability to change as we need, because hopefully we will be changing things. And we need to kind of, you know, be flexible and know what that's going to look like.
Wow. That's wonderful. I mean, I definitely see like themes emerging, this idea of character and acting with integrity and so forth. I see this idea of dynamism or adaptability or innovation. Yeah, and this relationship quality. Also too, I do see I created confusion because I think when I added what is the values of a city, I added it at the end because it's like, well, is there the value set of the coalition and how we behave, or is it what? And then I was asking, well, would they be different value sets? Maybe, you know, it's just interesting. Any reactions to anything so far? Anything we've talked about in terms of values? Yeah, any of this discussion so far as we round out the day? We're gonna do
I think
plus
these
deltas
goes,
in a moment.
I'm just thinking a little bit about like just the importance of defining. Like we were talking earlier about, like we all kind of have different like definitions in our mind of when you're talking about that whole general conversation around values. So maybe just we can figure out the clarity of that first, and then we can jump into the dialogue or something to keep in mind, because, you know, one thing might mean something different for me based on my personal experience versus somebody else. So
that is the whole problem. That is the whole issue of literacy. How do we as humans, you know, coordinate and organize through spoken, written, or other language? So fascinating. All right, let's bring this in. This has been like just a really, there's a lot to process from today. All right, but let's just see any pluses from today. A couple things real quick that you think went well, and then anything you think we could do different or better. So pluses first, and then we'll do next steps after all that.
Definitions, check.
Nice.
I think a plus would be that this group is really connected, and we came up with a lot of organizations as a team that we should be working with, whether super directly or as part of council to this group. And that was really great to see how many connections that we all have as a team.
Nice. Any other pluses?
I think this group has clearly like different people that have different strengths to help keep moving the group forward or to be a catalyst in different ways. So I think that's a plus here.
Lovely. Agreed. All right. Any deltas? Anything we could do better for next time, or anything we could change? If you think of something, let Tom know. Just kidding. I don't know why. I'm sensitive to feedback. No, just kidding. All right, next steps. what happened there? Topics for next time. We will be introducing the game plan idea, which is basically the structure of progression theory and kind of gives a map of the path ahead. We'll talk about the importance of strategy. What is strategy? Do we have any homework that we think makes sense for next time?
I mean, I have homework, but it's more around the potential partners and literacy across the lifespan. I don't know that, I mean, I think it's more us doing it for the group.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there's a question in there that if you all think of other possible partnerships, please let us know. And please do be thinking about the types of partnerships that you think would be useful, because we're going to essentially be providing a draft of that at the next session. And so getting your feedback and having already, been thinking about it would be very valuable for us.
Good. Anything else related to values for homework?
Well, I
Would you
think
like
also for us, we were gonna try to put together kind of a consolidated list based on what we heard from everyone. But also, yeah, please do keep thinking about this topic, and we'll be curious to get your feedback on the other side.
and keep coalescing.
I do have a
Coalesce with one
delta.
another. Go ahead, Tom. What's that?
I have a delta, and it's no more shameless ads from Adam. Where he starts broadcasting his ads that he's getting paid for. So
It was an accident. I don't even know.
If
I still
only he
don't
was
know.
actually getting paid for them, yes.
But that is true. Good.
I was kidding.
Yeah, I know. All right, y'all. Well, this is great. We are ending a minute early. I yield back 30 seconds. No, it's already 12:30. Too late. All right. We'll see you next time. Great job, everybody.
Bye, guys. It's great to see everyone.
Bye.